Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Rutherford County Schools. Tonight is a special call meeting, of course, to discuss the superintendent search. First order of business, as usual, is the Pledge of Allegiance, led tonight by Mr. Wayne Blair. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, good evening, everyone. The first order of business and the only order of business tonight is the superintendent search, service, and discussion with Mr. Randall Bennett, a true friend of Rutherford County Schools and a citizen of Rutherford County, I might add, and all of us have dealings with him in the past. Mr. Bennett, welcome. I think you can come right on up to the podium and we can get started.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Good to have you here. We have some people up here that have been through this before. It does not include me, but Mr. Blair has been through this, and Mr. Hodge and Mr. Holliday. And we will probably, undoubtedly, have some questions for you, and I'm sure you'll have some for us. So start wherever you'd like, sir. We're ready to go.
All right. Well, I would be remiss, this being School Board Appreciation Week, not to express my personal appreciation for the work you all do for Rutherford County. As a citizen of Rutherford County, I've never doubted that my tax money is being well spent by this group, and I appreciate all you do, and I appreciate the constant growth that you've done, keeping up with the population and doing better and better on state assessments. So thank you very much. You have my appreciation, and I just wanted to share that with you before I got started.
You're very kind to mention it, and I think all of us probably got phone calls from Tennessee School Board Association this past week, and from Ms. Grissom. I think mine came yesterday afternoon. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, I tried to get her to set them at 2 o'clock in the morning, but she wouldn't do it. I put two, well, actually Joyce put them up there, documents, asked her to put two documents on your desk. The first, this brochure, is what you did last time. We basically, if you look at the brochure, these were the criteria that were developed as of last time. I would suggest that as a starting point. I'm not suggesting you necessarily duplicate this. You may not want to use all 10 that you've got here, but these are what came out of the community meetings and the interviews last time, and I think there's some legitimate, decent criteria there. So that would be, once we got information from you, this would what we would use to distribute, to get out, to put online and get folks interested in it. Obviously, we're going to have to correct the district page, because it says you have approximately 37,600 students, and I know you're well over 40. So obviously there's some demographic information that we'd have to update since the last time we did this, and there may be more information about the community that you'd like to change. You might want to mention that bridge. You never know. I mean, first day I opened, I left church on Sunday, and I thought, man, this is living. I like that. But the very back of the brochure talks about the application process, and of course, you know, we would change that information as well, but ask them for all of those things: a formal letter of interest, current resume, including accomplishments, copy of the candidate's Tennessee or other state licenses and certifications if they have them, university transcripts, and names and address, telephone numbers of 5 professional references. Those would be the things I would suggest, and this, as I say, is a starting point for you. Also, you probably remember the critical timeline that we did from last time, the other timeline. I didn't put many dates on this. Number one, I don't know when you actually decided you wanted to talk to us. I would have put that date on there first, but I didn't have that. But as far as looking at the schedule and adopting criteria, I hope we can either get that tonight or get close to that tonight within a few days of this. And then if you're happy with that, I would like, as soon as we get the brochure and information, we can distribute it, put it online on our website, and I would like to suggest a March 2nd application deadline. That would give us roughly 4 weeks, maybe just a little bit more. By the time we got through the end of this week, we're almost to February anyway. So March 2nd application deadline, and then that would give us the opportunity to screen through the candidates, find out different things, and get our committee together, and then come back to you on the week of March the 12th through the 16th, whatever day would work well for you that week, to come back and make recommendations to you as far as who we think might be a worthy candidate to interview. So that's just a starting point. It's a bare bones timeline, and I just want to stop and let you ask me questions, because I think we'll get more accomplished if we go back and forth on the questions. So, gentlemen and ladies, I'm open for suggestions.
Board?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask Mr. Bennett to share his experience in this process? I know he has many years of doing this, so just for the board members that have not been through this process.
Absolutely, and you need to know you were kind enough to send this, which was extremely helpful to me, and board members did get a copy of this last week.
Good. I actually started assisting in these searches a little after I came to TSBA in about 1997, 1998. And the first place I helped Dr. George Nairn, who was the deputy executive director then, was in Humboldt. Since that time, I really have lost touch with how many superintendent searches that I've been involved in personally and that I've done. Dr. Grissom and I tend to take the team approach on this. I might start out talking. She might come to a meeting and talk to you about other things. It just depends on what we're going. But we both work together. And then, of course, we bring our screening team together to do that, too. The most recent search that we have done is, I think we did several up in Johnson City. We did Washington County. I've done Milan Special. We've done a lot of searches in the immediate area. So we've got a list, and if I saw the list, I could tell you which ones I personally conducted, but there's a list in that handout that you were talking about of all the people that we have done. And so we're very active with this. We provide this as a service to our members. We don't do this as far as executive searches for anyone else. We're just looking to do our members, and we want to do it because we want to provide a good process for you at a reasonable cost and help you and assist you in finding somebody that fits your criteria and fits your personality as a board. For those of you that did the process the last time, I thought it was a pretty good process. We did community meetings. We gathered a lot of information there, and I think the community is pretty consistent now with what it was when we did it back in 2012. And I think doing the more abbreviated search like this will get you on the move quicker and get you going that direction. But again, we're open to whatever you all as a board would like to do.
I think it's fair to say that we have, well, Mr. Hodge has recommended plan number 1.
Yes.
But we did not vote on that. So really, we haven't decided anything.
Right.
Really, except obviously there's going to be a search. And you all, we're going to ask you all to do it. I think that's kind of where we are. Well, the board may have I'm sure they do have other questions. Board? Mr. Bennett? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bennett, on the back of the brochure where you're talking about the application process, you've got a screening committee will review candidates' qualifications. Can you tell me who the screening committee will consist of?
Well, it'll consist of myself and Dr. Grissom, but as far as the other people that we involve, no, I can't, because they will not participate if people know who they are. These are people who may be college professors. These may be people who are retired superintendents, current superintendents of a different part of the state, people who work at colleges and universities and different folks like that. We bring together anywhere from 3 to 5 people to sit down and talk, but they only agree to do it if we don't out them. So we don't.
Okay, fair enough, thank you.
But it is definitely myself and Dr. Grissom.
In your experience with boards, we have 3 members of our board who have done this before and 4 who have not. What is the appropriate perspective for a board member that has done this before? Do you bring that experience, or do you work to wipe the slate clean and see this fresh and new? How have you seen, you guys always have stories of, I've seen it go this way or I've seen it go that way, and I would be interested in that experience.
Well, I don't think you can possibly do this process and then do it again later on without bringing something from the process that you've done before. I mean, it just makes sense. As someone who's a search consultant, I do bring a lot of information from the past searches that I've done, and it helps me sometimes to give information when controversy arises that's beneficial. But I think that being involved in the process is a plus, really. So if you've done it before, I think it's to your advantage. but I don't think it's to your detriment if you haven't. As a matter of fact, I think the process is well laid out. It's easy to follow, and we try to guide you and answer your questions as we go.
Are there things that the board should consider in this specific time period, kind of a unique circumstance here where, generally speaking, we're on good terms with the current director of schools, and yet we have a definitive transition period?
Right.
There are times as a board where you may want to make some type of move, some type of organizational change or policy change or something like that, and yet it's going to have personal implications. It's just going to affect somebody if you say, hey, we think that the board ought to have approval of the director's transportation or something of that nature. Are there things that at this specific time period where we're not necessarily speaking directly to any one individual, things that the board should consider in policy or practice? Is that
Are
clear?
you talking primarily about your relationship with an incoming director of schools? Is that what you mean?
It would end up being the relationship with the incoming director. For instance, if the board, very hypothetical, just for instance, if the board were to say, we would like confirmation power in Rutherford County, just in Rutherford County, in our policy, we would like confirmation power of the assistant superintendents.
The law doesn't allow that.
The law doesn't allow for us to...
You to be involved in that. All personnel decisions below the superintendent by law are made by the superintendent.
Okay. If we wanted to...
Now, that doesn't mean to say you can't express your opinion to the superintendent, but you can't control it.
Okay. Okay. See if there's anything else. All right.
Ms. Moore?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bennett, jumping to the bottom of the timeline, so superintendent assumes position July 1st.
I assume that was your date. Now, it may not be.
Well, and my question is, and I don't, some others on the board may be able to answer this for me. I mean, obviously, you know, Mr. Odom is retiring. It's a very professional, pleasant parting. We hate to see him go, but we understand we've got to do what we've got to do. And I always wonder about the wisdom of having someone new being able to spend time with their predecessor, learning the ropes, so to speak. I mean, is that something that is typical, or do most school systems normally wait for the...
It does happen, and it happens with some regularity, but it's not a majority of the time, because very often you just don't have that opportunity.
Well, and that's
It's difficult, particularly, now if you're promoting from within, as far as superintendents, that's a very easy thing to do. But if you're bringing someone in from the outside, generally you've got a smaller period of time.
timeline.
Yeah, so it's all very fact-specific. Plus, you may have contract issues, and I would refer you to your attorney on those as far as the contract issues you have with your current director and the negotiation of a contract with a new director.
Blair?
Speaking to that, knowing what a professional Mr. Odom is and will continue to be, if that selection could be made, 45 days before the end of his term, which of course would be June 30th, I think that would bode well for us, for Mr. Odom to have that time with the new director, and the new director to have time with Mr. Odom to get situated into the central office. My opinion, and just mine, is that since we did all those surveys the last time, there really isn't a need to pursue that this time. As you said, the community is, although it's growing, we've still have the same philosophy and mentality towards academic excellence. I would I would prefer to see us just go straight into TSBA advertising the position, taking applications. That could be a 3 to 4 week period. Would that be correct, Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, approximately.
And then once we have the application deadline, time frame as far as vetting those candidates and going through the selection committee, what kind of time frame would that be?
I would say a week to 10 days. As you can see on this particular timeline that I did, I just chose March the 2nd as an application deadline. I believe this falls on a Friday of that week, it's last of February. And then as far as the vetting, that would take place between then and the week of March the 12th. And I would presume that we would come back with recommendations a week to 10 days later.
I guess this board is going to have to direct you to, I believe the last time we went through this process, Mr. Hodge and Mr. Holliday may have to remind me too. I think we asked for a 3 to 5 number of candidates for you to present to us to interview. Is that what you recollect?
That is.
I think we had 5 last time.
Okay.
I think you did too.
So,
And let me say this, I don't expect there to be a shortage of people interested in this job, so I think there would probably be 5 credible candidates out there. But we will not give you 5 for the sake of giving you 5. We don't want you to waste your time if we don't think we've got a number of really credible candidates that we think it would benefit you to sit down and talk to. So it might be 4, it could even be 3. We've had that happen before, but you know, you get to the point where we just don't want to throw a body at you for you all to conduct an interview and basically spin your wheels. So we want you to have good quality folks to talk to.
I believe that what I just outlined is the way I would like for us to go, and not work through the surveys. Just utilize your expertise to advertise, to vet, and to let you, Dr. Grisham, and your group select those 3 to 5 candidates to bring back to us as soon as reasonable.
As soon as we get updated information for the brochure as far as the demographics of the district, and of course we'd have to put the new board on here as opposed to this was some years ago. Once we had it in our hands, I would imagine we could have it online and out within 2 days. So we won't let a lot of grass grow under our feet on that one.
If we followed this March 2nd date, which you just recommended, and we got back, let's just say 5 for, I don't really care, but 4 or 5, whatever it is, by the 12th, you would present that to us, I guess, right here, right where you're standing right now.
Yes, right here, and whatever day that week you would want me to.
And then Ms. Michaels would set up interviews with those 5 people, I would assume reasonably quickly. I'm really going back to what Mr. Hodge and Ms. Moore were talking about a minute ago. Let's say we could do that within 2 weeks.
Yeah, and my suggestion would be that you, before that time arises, pick the dates that you're pretty sure you can all be here for interviews and have that nailed down. And then I can also talk to the candidates as far as finding out who can be here, when, what.
Would they be available for an interview during this 2-week period or something like that? That'd be appropriate, I would think.
Most people do. Some boards try to do 4 to 5 interviews in 1 week. That's rough. I would suggest 2 to 3 a week. You can do 3 a week. And if you got 5, you could do 2 1 week and 3 1 week.
They run together, I would assume, if you're not careful.
It does, and we'll talk about the interview process and taking good notes, because if you don't, you'll get totally lost with what you've.
We have the right to add in a 6th candidate if my board member wanted to?
It's your process. You have the right to do anything you want to do.
Okay, I just want to get it out in the open.
Yeah, absolutely. We simply are facilitators. This is your process. The law says that you choose the superintendent of schools and contract with him for up to 4 years. And so what we try to do is facilitate that process to you, and however you choose to handle that, that's fine with us. We're not making decisions, we're just...
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I understand. Well, I want to go back to what they said a minute ago. There's been I think it's appropriate that if we're going to hire somebody in early April, perhaps, just to throw a time out there, and I think it would really be beneficial if that person was with Mr. Odom for May and June, and particularly at our meetings and the budget process. I think that would be very helpful to them the following year, and I assume we could do that if we wanted to.
Oh, yes. It's just a matter of the logistics between the new superintendent, the old superintendent, and putting it all together. So, yeah, that's certainly something you could do.
The advertising part of this, I'm pretty hazy on that. Like I said, we haven't voted on a thing, except we're going to do it. Where would you advertise normally? Or that's not even a good question.
Well, we've got a list of that we send the brochure to. We advertise it to all the college departments of education, all the colleges and universities in Tennessee. We send it to each and every superintendent, the Tennessee Organization of School Superintendents. We've got another list throughout the Southeast that we also email to, and then it's posted on our website, and it's part of the National Affiliation of Superintendent Searches, which is NSBA's organization of folks like us around the country. And other people from other states have access. I've actually had people from Alaska apply for jobs here in Tennessee. So
we could limit that, though, if we so chose.
If you wanted to, yeah. It's your search. So if you would rather us limit it down, I can limit it to what you want it to.
Well, they're welcome to speak at any time and correct me right now. They do it all the time. But I feel that special attention should be paid to Rutherford County and to the state of Tennessee. That's kind of my feeling. I don't know what the board says, and it's certainly time for them to talk. So, board, yes, sir, Mr. Young.
Looking through the process here, I'm totally comfortable with what I see. I would like to ask the 3 board members that's been through this process before, is there anything about this process you would change from the last time? If y'all look through here, is there anything you wish you would have done different?
Other than the surveys, I just don't think we need to do those again.
I think where the selection criteria is, I think most of that involved around the community meetings and everything. You agree?
Oh, yeah, all the selection criteria were developed from surveys that we did throughout the community, and also I think we did some online, if I'm not mistaken. We did that as well. And then we compiled all that, brought it back to the board, and we talked about it, and the board adopted those criteria at that time. It may be that you want to modify some of those, and that's certainly nothing wrong with that, but this is what we did the last time. And if you look at the criteria and what you're really looking for, if you can find somebody who can do all 10 of those things, they may be able to walk across water too. I don't know. It's a wonderful list, and I think it's something to aspire to, and it would let potential candidates know that you want certain characteristics in your superintendent. And I think having that information out there like that, if you just read over it, that's quite a person if you can get that. And what we find is when we go around to other systems, generally, these are the 10 criteria that will rise to the top out of the 20 that we ask folks to do. But what happens that's interesting is it will be, sometimes the top 5 will be these 5, and other systems, the top 5 will be these 5. And a lot of that depends on what's going on in the system at that particular time. If we have a system that has money problems and they feel like the superintendent doesn't manage the money well, then the financial manager goes to the top of the list. If we've got a system where the previous superintendent has not been good with going out and meeting the public speaking and things, that tends to move toward the top of the list. So those things vary depending on your situation and what is really important to you all. So we just wait for direction from you on how to order those.
What's the latest you need to know something before, if we want to change something about this process, what would be the latest time we can make that change?
It's up to you. I mean, as soon as you get me any changes that you've got, I would like to post it this week if we could, which I guess the latest would be Friday. I could probably get Lindsay on it, and it would probably get posted by Monday or Tuesday. because she's got to reformat and change all the things in the old brochure and you know, come up with different things, get all the corrections. And you may have a different logo you'd like on the front. I know we used this last time. There may be other things you want on there too, but as soon as I have all the information for the brochure, I can get our communications department on it, and once she gets it done and we get it proofread, we get it posted and out very quickly.
I'm just hoping with a couple of board meetings we got this week, we could have this decided by Wednesday. That's what I'm hoping to do.
Mr. Young, you asked about what we would change, and the only thing that concerns me is what we are changing, which is reducing the community input. And I just say that with I understand the efficiency and I understand the consistency of our community, and that while in fact it may not have changed that much and we may not find any large differences, I just wonder, does the community have an expectation of when do they get their say? I made note of that as I was preparing for tonight, as well as is it appropriate, you know, in those community meetings was the time when we were able to say to our Health and Education Committee at the County Commission, y'all got any input that we need to listen to? To our mayor, anything that we need to consider from you? In some ways, it's just a polite and appropriate thing to reach out. And in our current circumstances, perhaps the one thing that has developed since the last search is our close relationship with the Chamber of Commerce and their influence on some of our educational offerings. And that's something that it's expected that a director of schools needs to have a good relationship with the funding body, good relationship with the principals and teachers, good relationship with the community. We expect that the director of schools is going to have a rather intimate relationship with the Chamber of Commerce in Rutherford County, and that's something that is a little unique in our system.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
The community is not surprised by this search. It's been in the media here for quite some time. We're all involved in the community intimately. We go to church, we go to the store, we visit schools. Social media. If somebody wants to share their opinion about what the next director of schools looks like, experience, all of those opportunities have and continue to be there. That they can get us by phone, they can get us in church, they social media, you know, we've done this before, and this is all well and good as far as what we did the last time, but as far as duplicating that process, you know, the final decision rests on the 7 of us, and I think we can do our due diligence and listen to the community if the community wants to contact us, and still work through this timeline. So I continue to believe that the surveys really are not going to be anything, would not be an advantage to us. And I would like for us to move on into the search process.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Estes.
I'm going to agree with Mr. Blair on that. I'm sure most of y'all I've already heard from several people what we do and don't need, whether that's right or wrong. Agree with him on this form. I hate to see us start completely over, because this right here was a lot of work when y'all did it last time. Y'all put a lot of time in it, a lot of hard work. reading over it, it looks like to me it would pretty much fit what we have this year. I would be willing to use this, you know, with the changes. And I also agree with Mr. Jordan. We've had very good luck out of Rutherford County on directors of schools. And if at all possible, that would be a good fit for us. Somebody didn't have to totally learn everything else.
I think that's something that probably we need to handle, that if the majority of the board feels that way, then they can do that. I think we probably don't need to limit you all to say just Rutherford County. I don't think that's fair. We could do it with the counties maybe that touch Rutherford, maybe, or just Tennessee or Middle Tennessee, with something along that general line. I don't want to complicate your job any, but because it's pretty complicated anyway as it is. I want to go back to what Mr. Young was talking about, and let the board help me with just a little bit. This is a special call meeting. Of course, you discuss only this. But we've got a meeting tomorrow night, a work session tomorrow night, and a regular meeting on Wednesday, where we're talking about a number of different items. Can we add this to the discussion on Wednesday night and get it, which I guess means tomorrow night, and get it into the system and get started on this, or have them get started on this later this week? Can we do that legally? We have enough time, do we not, to do that?
Are you saying not vote tonight?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. But there's going to be a number of changes, a number of things we're going to have to tell Mr. Bennett to do. Do you want to go through all those tonight? Maybe yes, maybe you do.
I would.
Well, we've got dozens of changes just on this.
Well, I don't know as far as, I'm not sure about what changes you're talking about, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
Demographics.
starts in the first line,
Statistics.
July 1, 2012.
Just typo changes.
I mean, I'm just, and we've got a lot here under the district.
Yeah, the district it needs to be done, although I would imagine you've got that information.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very easily plugged in.
Sure.
So,
My opinion continues to be that we go ahead and set dates tonight, and any tweaking that we need to do, that we could take advantage of, maybe of a board meeting. I would think that, but as far as setting timelines and what we're looking for, I would think we could do that tonight.
Make a motion on part 1 or part 2 then, and
Well, before we go there, is it appropriate for us to review the director's job description and perhaps revise it in any way? Is that a typical thing that boards do?
I wouldn't call it typical. Generally, boards start thinking about that when they narrow down the finalist to somebody they're very serious about, and then that starts happening then as far as job description and contract. You can change a job description at any time, but the contract, of course, once you get that set, it's set until it's time for renewal, unless you both mutually agree to change it. So, you know, you can, from a policy standpoint, you can go through and modify your policy on the director's duties, different things like that, and get that ready. And of course, it would be ready, and you could simply reference that in your contract. And again, I'm going to refer to your attorney as far as dealing with that process, because I think you need to have him involved in not only contract, but any other changes you want to make in that situation. But it may be a little early in the game for that.
When it comes to taking a look at a job posting, there's no reference here as to compensation or benefits or peripherals, any of those kind of things. How do you respond to candidates who say, what's this job pay?
The only thing I can tell them is that the current salary is blank. I don't know the other compensation, anything like that, and unless the board says to me, we're looking at a range of blank to blank.
And is there a typical, I mean, do boards typically say anything along those lines?
Not as often as I'd like for them to.
Okay.
Because I get that question almost every candidate that talks to me wants to know what the salary is. They're curious about that. So the more information that I have along those lines, the better. But I'm always very cautious to say, I know they're paying this, and I know they provide this benefit and that benefit, but I can't give you the specifics on what that package would be. And that's part of the negotiations process between the board and the new superintendent as well.
I haven't been 100% clear. The chairman has expressed a preference toward local candidates or in-state candidates and things of that nature. I haven't been able to understand exactly if it has changed the way in which you plan to advertise this posting in any way, if we've limited you. I will say that as we are a system that I like to say is among the leaders in the state, if not the best in the state, and it's appropriate for us to benchmark ourselves against the top 50 in the nation, and perhaps more select than that. It may be appropriate for us to have national recruiting, and then whatever preference we want to make as a board as to which candidates we look at, that's reasonable. But public education is beyond Rutherford County and beyond the state of Tennessee, and I don't think that we should have blinders on as we go into this search.
The last time we did this, basically the advertisement was as you described earlier. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is what we advertised with the last time.
No, I mean as far as the going to TOS, going to
Oh, yes,
SBA.
going to all those, particularly Tennessee and the Southeast.
Okay, and I don't recall getting, even though at that time we were the 5th largest in the state, now we're the 4th. I don't recall getting a lot of national candidates. Do you recall that?
We have a few that seem to apply for everything.
Everything.
I call them perennials.
And I don't know that really matters. That
It doesn't, because I've already vetted them and I'm not going to put them in.
right.
I
As
already
long
know
as long as you do your due diligence, which I have full confidence that you and the committee will, where you advertise, I don't know really matters to us, or at least it doesn't matter to me. At least you've done your due diligence from the advertising part, and you've done your due diligence from the vetting and from the selection process. And as long as you do those 3 things, that makes me comfortable that you've served our community and this board.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Bennett, I want to concur, I think, first of all, with what Mr. Holliday said when he talked about the scope of the search. When you look at the size of this school system, and I think not just about the size of the school system, but what's happening in this community with the growth that we're experiencing. I mean, absolutely, going back to what you said earlier, thinking that we're not going to have a problem you're not going to have a problem presenting 5 really solid candidates to this board. I suspect, and I may be wrong, but you're probably going to struggle to narrow it down to 5. I think we have I think we will have some tremendous candidates that are going to present themselves locally. When I say locally, I mean already within the Rutherford County system. And I certainly would concur that if a local candidate is absolutely the best candidate for the job, that would be advisable. But I also think when you look at the size of this community and the growth, that it would be somewhat short-sighted of us not to open it up on a national level. Now, you may or may not come back with anybody, and that's fine. But I think we have a responsibility to the community to be able to say we didn't leave any stone unturned in searching for the best director of schools for this community and our school system.
Potential superintendent candidates do tend to visit websites on a regular basis.
Right.
They know where they are. And our website gets the same kind of traffic as others do. So even if I tried to limit it, they would find out about it, and I would get applicants from outside the region.
Well, and I go back to, I think you mentioned the NSBA as being one of the opportunities for posting.
Well,
right.
TSBA and many of the other school boards associations around the country belong to the National Affiliation of School, Superintendent Searchers. And we have a spot on the NSBA website where anything that we post is linked to, and so, you know, the potential is always there for somebody.
Well, I would certainly think that would satisfy that criteria. Then I'm certainly not suggesting that we go out and start spending any advertising in out-of-state
there will be
newspapers.
national exposure.
Yeah.
Even if I tried to stop it, I'm not sure I could.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hodge.
Just make a couple comments. Looking at this this thing we used last time, I'm like Mr. Blair. I'm pretty comfortable using all of it. You know, I'd like to see us. You know, I don't know when we have to make a motion or whatever, because I'm sure we've got to make some kind of motion what we're going to do. Mr. Bennett, this is my question for you. I know I'm more inclined to go with the Plan 1. Forget the. I don't think going through the community and all that, you're going to come up with anything any different than what we already did last time. On Plan 1 or Plan 2, I know you had you included last time, I believe, where you had meetings with individual board members. Would you include that in Plan 1?
I'd be happy to. It wouldn't even have to be face-to-face, but it could be phone calls, and we could talk. Anyone that would like.
That would be, you know.
But since I live in the community, it would be easy for me to do face-to-face too.
Okay. I know you had it split up between Plan 1 and Plan 2.
Yeah.
You know, if you were to include something like that, but.
I have a personal preference for talking individually each board member, because I can get some good information, give some good perspective, and I can put all that together and kind of get a feel for where the board as a whole is and where it might want to go. So, yeah, if you decide to do it, I'll be contacting each of you personally and individually, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about as far as that goes.
Okay, so if we were to make a motion on this, I know we got some dates to plug in over here. Beyond the select the candidate dates. If we were to approve something tonight, basically what we got with the whole concept and all that, other than, I guess we could probably change these numbers, just basically what we're talking about, and approve that thing at Thursday night's board meeting.
I am sure that you've got somebody in this district who works for you who keeps information like this up to date, and I'll bet they've got something that's absolutely perfect to plug in where this information is. And I would defer to them. It'd be a simple matter of them sending the information. And once that, you know, once we get all that, like I said, it's not going to be difficult to get this out and get it going. But all the awards that you've won lately, all the things that you've achieved, I think they need to be included in this information on the district too. So, and I'm sure that information exists out there. It's probably already in the form of a press release. So it may be very quick, easy to put that together.
Mr. Evans probably has everything that you would need, actually, I would think.
Do, and if I'll get a copy of that brochure tonight, and I can have it to you by tomorrow afternoon.
Are you going to put it on that YouTube link that I saw earlier?
I'll include a link.
Okay.
I would think we should go ahead tonight and approve the plan. And
That's what I was getting at, other than you approve the plan and the dates and all that. But what I was just saying, to approve the pamphlet on Thursday.
I concur.
Or Wednesday. That's what my thinking is.
If at some point along the way, the community wants to voice an opinion, what would the board feel is an appropriate manner? We've talked about contacting us individually, but is there a pathway that a constituent could contact us to put it on the record publicly, their feelings about the process? Would it be appropriate in visitor time of a general board meeting? I'm genuinely asking, you know, for the board's input as to when is the appropriate time for that.
Well, I would think, first of all, they could certainly come to a board meeting. We don't limit that at all, and speak. In this case, the next one for public speaking time, visitor time, is Wednesday night. Evidently, the general public thinks that the pathway is to call Jeff Jordan. That seems to be the president, or talk to him at church. And so then I got 4 recommendations in the last 24 hours, and none of them were the same. And I suspect that these people are getting them too. And we understand that. Well, you know, I'm okay. I assume they are too. But we need to get this process started in the appropriate way. Asking me to support so-and-so who hasn't applied, probably will not apply, and may not be a good candidate. I don't think that's a very good pathway to follow, but I was elected, and I'm going to listen. But again, for the second time, we may need a motion here on part 1 and on dates or whatever you want to include, so Mr. Bennett can at least start some preliminary work here.
If we can get a date to start the candidate interview, since we have Ms. Michaels here, I'm pleased to make a motion here in just a short time.
Okay, well, he wanted to come back with, you want a deadline of March 2nd, and I'm not saying that these are written in stone.
No, they're not written in stone.
He was just throwing that out there.
Feel free to change those. I was looking at like I say,
right,
4 to 5 week period of posting.
And you would come back the 12th, and we may well have meetings on any of those dates. I don't know whether we do or not. Okay. Okay. So and then you want to set dates for us to interview the 4 or 5 or 3 or candidates after that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Can we just give them a 2-week window? We don't want to set those dates up now, but we can tell them, I don't think.
Well, we could set a tentative date to begin.
We could. Well, you're the lady with the calendar.
Not to mention, it's going to be terribly complicated because right after the 12th, we have 2 board meetings that are already scheduled the next week, followed by spring break, followed by national convention, and then we're in the middle of April before we've got the first interview, unless we do something different.
We probably need to do something different. I don't know what it is, but I hate to wait till April to have an interview after he's made recommendations to us on the 12th.
Well, we're talking 2 days to interview, correct?
We're talking 5 days to interview 5 candidates.
I'm thinking one a day. That's
a day.
It's easier on the board and easier on the candidates. If you try to do multiple candidates in one day, you may have a lot of information you want from them, and it may not work as well. We recommend you break it down to one day, give them a tour of the district, different things like that, and let them see. But we also have boards that don't follow that. They do an initial round of interviews by saying an hour and a half for each one, and they do that in a short period of time, and then they start to narrow down a little bit, and they bring the other ones back for longer interviews. So there's no right or wrong way. It's just whatever way is best for you all.
That is one of the things. According to their plan, it is. Those 5 candidates potentially would tour around to multiple sites in the district during the day. They would meet various people. That would be accompanied by board members potentially. And so we may want to look at doing that differently, maybe a first and second round of interviews.
Again, we'll structure it however you want to structure it, whatever works best for this board.
Ms. Moore?
One thing we might want to consider is we're getting ready or preparing for a motion, and I go back to the thought process of, and the question I think that Mr. Reed probably is going to have to answer for us is, if the board is in majority that we agree that the candidate that's offered the position, their start date would be sooner to have the opportunity to spend time with Mr. Odom before he leaves the system. So that's going to be a date that's going to be critical on this brochure too. So, and I mean, to me, ideally, if the timing can work out, would be that we have the candidates start on June 1st as opposed to July 1st, thus giving them the benefit of several, if not weeks, if not a full month, to be able to shadow Mr. Odom before he actually takes his retirement. But I know there's several things to be considered there. Obviously, we're going to have 2 months of double salary, or a month of double salary, which, you know, with the salary range like this, it's not inexpensive. And again, as you mentioned, Mr. Bennett, from a contract standpoint, I don't know if that's something that we were able to do or not. And I think if we could get Mr. Reed to speak to that.
I would say you can. I do think it's a good idea, as I think everyone else has expressed, to have a transition time. And you have, if particularly you have an incoming superintendent, if you have someone who may be from out of district even who ends up in that position, I think it'd be particularly valuable to them to have time to work with Mr. Odom before he leaves. Because obviously once the contract is currently up with Mr. Odom, he has no obligation to provide any further services to the Board of Education at that point. If you can go to Mr. Odom, ask him to extend, to work with the new director of schools for some additional time, should he choose to do that. That's something we would have to go to Mr. Odom and ask him whether he would be willing to do that, and if so, on what terms. So that would be an option available to you. The other, but from a standpoint of having a contract with a new superintendent start in June as opposed to July, you can do that contractually. Of course, you just have the logistics of figuring out, you know, when they physically have to get out of their prior job, if they have a prior job, and when they can actually be here. So there may be some logistical issues to deal with, but from a pure contractual standpoint, you can contract with someone to start in June. Should you do that to work, and of course, Mr. Odom will still have the role of director of schools through the time that his term is up. So their role as a director of schools would not really start until July 1st, but they would work on an interim basis for that 1 month period or whatever period of time gets worked out.
But you think we could work it out?
Actually,
as long as the candidate's willing to obviously agree to that.
Yes. Mr. Bennett, do you have perspective as to what typically coordinates with school system schedules? Because I imagine pulling a director of schools out at one point in the year is more problematic than another time of year.
By the spring, I think things have pretty much taken place in most school districts, and all the work that's being done. You know, it's just a matter of watching it, you know, shepherding it through the end of the year. And I would think that would be a time that you would find more flexibility. It's very difficult for someone to start in the fall and then want to move somewhere by December because there's so much going on. So I think there's more flexibility after the first of the year and on into spring as far as the incoming director. And if they really want the job, they'll come anyway.
But no difference between May 1st, June 1st, July 1st?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, you've got the end of school for some of them, but if they want the job badly enough, they'll come whenever you want them.
And it's conceivable to me that we could have this process completed and that the new director could start May 1st and have 60 days of getting to know the system.
On that,
if that's what you're looking for as far as the start date, I need to know the start date eventually when you decide on that, because I want to put that information in the brochure.
On that note, is there too much overlap where, you know, you get in one another's way?
It depends on the people. And, you know, I don't know that it necessarily would or wouldn't be. I've known Mr. Odom for a few years. He's a very gracious person, and I think he would do an incredibly good job of trying to bring someone on and show them all the ropes as doing it. And you find other people that are not so nice. So you're lucky. You've got a good superintendent to help with an incoming person.
The only experience that I have or that I would share about that is I recently was given some information about when Kay Nixon stepped away from her position and Tyra Pilgrim took that role. I think Kay may have had, you know, some period of time, 30 days, 60 days, something like that, that she was available to assist. And Ms. Pilgrim told me, I think she spent 2 days and then said, "You got this." And so with that in mind, I might suggest to the board that a June 1st start date that would guarantee us 30 days of overlap, and then potentially we go ahead and approach Mr. Odom and ask, would he be willing to spend the month of July with us at the incoming director's option? And if the incoming director selected to have an additional 30 days of overlap, then the board would be willing on the front end to offer that.
Just a question I'd have, what if you get somebody within the system?
Well,
I mean, if you get somebody within the system, they can pretty well, wherever they're at, work in both positions, I would think.
right, and so would more than 4 weeks be necessary?
What's that?
I wonder
if
if
you'd have to have if you pick somebody within the system, I don't know why you need the June 1st deadline.
Well, I would think it would still be very beneficial, even for somebody in the system, to be able to actually spend that time shadowing him. Because even if you're looking at, an assistant superintendent or a principal from one of our schools, I mean, what the director of schools does, there's still, I think, a broad enough scope there that anybody could benefit from having that time with him again, as Mr. Bennett mentioned, as somebody as gracious as Mr. Odom that we know is going to share and really mentor like we would like to see.
Basically, and I don't have a problem with it, but I guess basically what you're saying is a June 1st start date. We're paying a director's salary for two times, correct?
For a month.
What you're getting at for
Correct.
1 month. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying.
I think 2 months would be.
I'm just saying if you got somebody within the system already employed by the system, if you were to get somebody,
Just kind of combine it.
are you going to still have June 1st? I don't have a problem either way. But I'm just make sure we all understand we're paying that director's salary twice.
Well, Mr. Bennett, if we put June 1st on the brochure and made that allowance for that, and Mr. Rita said from a legal standpoint we can do that, and then indeed we do hire someone from within the system where maybe it's not quite so necessary, I mean, those adjustments could always be made at that point, couldn't they? That we could say, hey, maybe a week. Maybe they spend 2 or 3 weeks, kind of a few hours a day or whatever, transitioning, and then maybe a full week one-on-one and be done with it.
That would be totally up to you as far as how you want to handle that. And I will say this, that there is no job in the world quite like superintendent of schools. And regardless of what you've done in education, it's a different ballgame when you get in there. But it is helpful, the more knowledge you have, and it's also helpful, and whoever comes in here, it's going to be wonderful for them because you've got such a great administrative staff here in central office that they can be a very supportive group, and that would be very helpful as well. The more people there are to help a new director of schools, you get somebody in with a director of schools experience, and they pretty much know how it works, and they consult with all these folks, and they move with it. Somebody who hasn't been a director of schools before, they may need the advice and assistance of the director of schools, and I think that's going to be a fact-specific decision that you all will just have to make when the time comes.
Mr. Bennett, is it doable that you could have these candidates ready for us to start looking at March 1st, and then we could start?
It would be a shorter period of time, but it is doable.
And then, Ms. Joyce, could we start looking at interviewing maybe the 12th of March?
We're okay that week, the whole week.
Okay. I think that would help us as far as our timeline if we want to try to beat April. If we do something like that. I was just asking. Yeah, I was just asking him if he could have our candidates ready for us by the 1st of March instead of waiting until the 12th.
I could move the application deadline back to the 23rd of March. And then
23rd of February, you mean?
yeah, what did I say, March? I'm sorry, February. Thank you, Mr. Blair. Yes, I could move it back to the 23rd of February. I could do the screening the last week of February, the first week of March, and then I could conceivably come back to you the week before, which would be March the 5th, and that would open up the rest of that week and the week of March 12th for you, if you wanted to do that.
So we could set up interviews, let's just say 5 people, 7th, 8th, 12th, 14th, 15th, something like that.
Sure. I mean, I think if they're really interested in the job, they'll be more than happy to find one of those dates that they can accommodate you.
Does the board want specific dates now? We want to give them a 2-week window there where... Who sets those up? Us?
I've done it in the past. It depends on, what we like to do is, once we come back with finalists, is to talk to them and ask them to hold a certain date.
Okay.
Generally, what I do is I get whoever's furthest out, I give them first shot at that. And then, you know, local candidates, I let them choose, because they're here anyway, so it's helpful. So I would...
Could we review Mr. Young's timeline again, just to make sure we're clear on that, which I think is a good idea? So the application deadline would be February 23rd, correct?
Yes.
And you'll have candidates vetted and presented to us by March 2nd? Did I understand that correctly?
Fifth.
March 5th.
Monday.
Special called meeting on the 5th.
And then the interview dates, again, would be,
Starting the week of the 12th. And then Ms. Joyce would have to give us what days would be available there.
Yeah, the 5th looks good, but we've got scope at MTSU on the 6th, and that's tournament week. You might want to keep that in mind for you all. But it looks good on my calendar as far as being back here on the 5th, Monday the 5th of March.
And you want us to give you dates that we want to interview between the 6th and the 9th, 12th, maybe the 15th?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but as soon as possible, it would be very helpful. Because when I start getting, well, I mean, I don't really need the dates until we get down to the real vetting process, but the sooner you make that decision, I think the better it is. But I don't need the information on the dates of your interview tonight.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Bennett, I know you're going to give us excellent advice and a lot of consultation on the interviewing process, but in the spirit of we wanted this meeting to set as many things in place as possible so that they are not, we're not changing the rules as we go. How much of the interview process do we need to determine, and we can do anything we want to do, but make a recommendation. How much of the interviewing process do we need to be aware of or set in place on this evening?
Generally, when I come back to do the final report to the board, I talk about the interview process. I bring back a proposed interview guide, which you are welcome to change and use in any way that you wish. But my real advice is that when you conduct the interviews, you conduct them exactly the same for each of the candidates that you interview. That way you can compare apples to apples. And that being the case, I think you need to take a look at the interview guide, and I would get it to you before I got back. Because with the criteria established, I can go ahead and pull some questions, modify some questions, and get them here. And as a matter of fact, I can get that to you before that date. But let's talk about that when we get there. And then also, I would recommend that you talk to your attorney about what you should and shouldn't ask in an interview, because you don't want to get in trouble with the EEOC.
Okay. What access will we have to the applications between February 23rd and March 5th?
Generally, we send a document Friday of every week to all the board members, and usually to the media too, because they can have access to the applications. If we want access to the entire application, we can accomplish that too. But we will send, you know, basic name, address, where they are now, what the position they're in now, so on and so forth. We'll send that out to you weekly.
Mr. Bennett, when you look at...
There's usually a lot more toward the end of the process than there's the beginning. Because people, this is out, let me think about this for a week or so. So the first week there might be one or none. But it really starts picking up as the deadline approaches. I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. Listen, a couple of things that are, in between those two steps, that we're relying on you for, the acknowledging and verifying the completeness of the candidates' files and thinking specifically to the evaluation of credentials and checking references. Are we truly allowing you enough time to accomplish that
I do
thoroughly?
those as they come in. As soon as I get a new application, we print out a file and I start following up on that. So yeah, there's enough time to do that.
Okay.
What type of, I understand you're going to give us instructions about the interview, but the superintendent search guide that the chairman shared with us and from the TSBA website, it talks about a tour of the system and going around and meeting various people and having introductions, and that being chaperoned potentially by board members and us being able to observe interactions and those kind of things. What would you recommend to this board with our circumstances, and do we wait until March the 5th to say something about the interview process? Is our first interview starting at Laverne Lake Elementary, and it goes around to various schools, and then we come back here at 5 o'clock and we have an interview here? Or how much do we plan for that? Or do we have a round of interviews in this room and then make a cut and go out? Can you make a recommendation there?
I like the process of doing the tour. It doesn't have to be a full-day tour, but that's nice because a county this size, it's useful to get around to see all the different schools, or at least a drive-by if nothing else. But perhaps a reception, perhaps meeting some folks at the Chamber of Commerce, as far as a reception. There's some other places like that. Getting them around, perhaps an opportunity for teachers to meet in a reception, and then come in here for the interviews that evening. If you're going to do the full day, I would recommend that. A whirlwind tour of the campus, get them with some business groups, perhaps the chamber, possible teacher groups, let them talk about that too, and then come in here for the interviews that night.
If you don't do the full day, what is the alternative?
The alternative is to just interview the candidate, have them come and just do it. I mean, you can go from one extreme to the other, and I have boards do it both ways, depending on their schedule and willingness to spend the whole day. I will say that when I was on the Johnson City Board, I was involved in that process. As a matter of fact, TSBA handled a search for us, and I was put in charge of one of the candidates, and I took this person around all day, took them to the different locations, things like that. And I enjoyed the process, so it was good. It gave us an opportunity to talk, that you don't always get. So I enjoyed that, but it's nice, but it's not totally necessary, depending on your schedule. And I know you're on a tight schedule with it. So it's however you want to handle the interview process.
I would share with my fellow board members that it's concerning to me the idea of spending 5 entire days in this process. I'm not saying it's not warranted. I'm just saying that on a scheduling aspect, I personally am going to have a real hard time with that, and it may just be a sacrifice that I've got to make. I don't know if anybody else has feelings along those lines or not.
You want to do more than one a day?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just wondering. I don't know. If we did more than one a day, that would help. And I don't want to be the instigator of it, but there is one board member that walks in at 4:59 consistently, and so I'm just kind of raising that to the rest of you. It's I don't know. And then I think about internal candidates. I mean, how much do they really need to, if we end up there, how much is that going to be an exercise in, wow, if I've seen this 27 times, what is that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but I think it's worth discussion.
do think we need to consider Mr. Bennett's recommendation that the interview should all look exactly alike, whether we're interviewing a candidate from Alaska or a candidate from inside the system, to be consistent and to be legally appropriate with how we manage the interview process.
However you decide to interview one, interview all. That's my recommendation.
And I
In
agree.
the same order, and the same one of you ask the same questions to each one of them, once you decide to split all that. So you'll get more consistent results that way, and you'll have a better opportunity to compare the candidates.
I agree with all of it. But the actual interview part, if I'm not mistaken, we did that in the evenings.
Right, right.
So if we did more than one, how would you do something like that? I'm in favor, I'm just like you. When I take off work, when we have a meeting, which I understand it. I mean, when we have a meeting, I knock off 3 o'clock, take a shower, so basically I lose a couple hours worth of work. Right now I'm not, so I can spend whatever time I need, but, so time is a factor for me too, but if we're doing like we did last year, did one interview a night, how could we do 2? I'm in favor of doing 2 or whatever we got to do to try to help out, but I don't know how you could actually do 2 in that, did you?
Well,
If you did if we did the interviews at 6 o'clock, does that make it a little easier on you?
yeah, but the thing is that potentially I'm gonna miss the interaction exposure where they meet a principal, they interact with a student that they pass in the hallway, and, as they're on this tour. There's that perspective, and do I get that? To Mr. Hodges' point, though, if we were to, and these are not hard and fast dates, but if we were to interview a candidate on the evening of the 12th, and then if we did a tour with 2 candidates during the day on the 13th, and then the second candidate we interviewed on the evening of the 13th, that would be a reasonable way to kind of combine the effort. Does that make sense, Mr. Bennett?
I hear what you're saying.
So you're wanting to tour with each candidate?
Well, somebody's going to tour with them. Is it going to be a board member, or will it be Mr. Bennett?
No, it'll be one of you.
Okay.
We recommend that you split them up amongst yourselves, the ones that really have the time and effort to do it, and take them on the tour.
Okay.
I know when we did it in Johnson City, like you, we had 7 board members and only 5 candidates, so only 5 of us acted as tour guides, I guess, for lack of a better word. So those of you that have the time and the inclination to do so would be able to, and those of you that don't wouldn't have to. I mean, it's up to you. All board members do not accompany all candidates on their tours, generally.
With the interview, how long? I mean, I don't see an interview being less than 2 hours.
I don't either. 2 to 3.
I think 2 in a night's going to be very.
Boy, that's going to be tough. Even if we started at 5, had a 30-minute break in between, socialized, met, talked, whatever. If we were, say, 2 hours and a half, I mean, that's 6 hours. It'd be 11 o'clock.
If you try to do 2 of them on one
Right.
night. Yeah.
Right.
That would be a long night.
Somebody's going to get shortchanged.
I would think so. That worries me. The second candidate.
The interview itself in the evening is not my concern. It's the tour. And Mr. Bennett explaining that one board member takes the candidate on the tour, that, not all board members are accompanying them on the tour, then that says, okay, then that board member brings back a report, hey, this is what I witnessed. They interacted this way and that way and those kind of things. That makes it reasonable. My anticipation was, and again, we can do anything we want to do, but that all board members would be welcome on the tour. One board member might be assigned. But if we were to say that it is one board member's responsibility, as a fellow board member, I would feel less pressure than to make myself available to witness what other board members witnessed. That's what I'm suggesting.
I think just off the top of my head here, if 4 or 5 board members and a candidate started touring the system and going here and going there and walking through a school, I'm not sure I just don't see that happening. It looks like an entourage coming through. But to have a board member assigned, there's 7 of us, and we're talking about 4 or 5 people here. You know, I think we just, you know, if it were, I can just speak for myself, I guess. If I were doing it, I would take the candidate, and we'd kind of decide where we wanted to go, discuss it with them, go meet the principal, and watch them change classes, and maybe observe something, you know, whatever, and go to an elementary school, middle school, and a high school. And I'll tell you, and I think you all agree with me, the people that really know are sitting over here at this table over here. And I wouldn't have any problem with asking a supervisor to go with me at all. I think that would be good, but I think 1 is plenty.
It was all, when I did it way back in the early, well, yeah, the early 90s, that I could not have taken a day for each candidate. I could only handle 1. I had to take a day off for that. Yeah. So, no, I think it's unreasonable to ask all of you to go, or multiple ones of you to go. If just 1 board member stays with that candidate, I think you give the candidate the support they need, particularly if they're not a local candidate. Then I think you give them the support they need, and you can answer questions for them. And it's a good opportunity.
I think as we continue to discuss this, I think a 5 to 5:30 reception with each candidate to give casual interaction prior to a 5:30 interview, I think that could have merits, and I'd be interested in other board members. You know, you could have it beforehand or afterward where you have that, but and I think more than 30 minutes of casual interaction could potentially get awkward with just 7 of us. And I don't know if 7 is the right number to be in the room for that reception time. That may be appropriate to have central office there, or we may want to hold it just for the board to have that time with the candidate.
We may have drifted a bit off task here, and we may be a little bit ahead of ourselves. Although I think all these things are absolutely appropriate for discussion, maybe a future discussion. I'm not sure, but. Anyway, having not done this before, I'm struggling a bit, but trying to do the best I can. You need something. We need to get Mr. Bennett on task here. I think we may be off task.
This last round of dates is going to be good. If I could get a motion and a vote from you on the timeline as far as it ending on the application's deadline date, February the 23rd. I come back on March the 2nd to present the candidates, and you will start your interviews the week of March 12th. Is that accurate?
March 2nd?
What did I say?
That was the 5th.
March 5th, I'm sorry.
5th, yeah, okay.
March 5th, and then March 12th, starting the interviews. And then I get the information from that needs to be updated for the brochures. That's really all I need at this point. All the rest of those are decisions that you all can make a little bit more at your leisure.
You don't need to know about plans 1 and 2? Or
Well, I assumed you had decided on plan. Well, yeah,
No, we have not.
And include that in your motion too. If you vote to do Plan 1 and you accept the dates that we just talked about there, and somebody's going to get me the updated information as soon as possible, then I can get posted.
It also included what Mr. Hodge, not interviews, but the session with each board member.
Yes.
Personal interaction with each board member.
Yeah. I will call each of you, starting probably tomorrow.
Okay, board.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Could you make it out loud?
He didn't want to repeat it, I could say.
Plan 1 with the personal interaction with each board member by Mr. Bennett with the dates that he specified. Are you good with those dates, Ms. Joyce? Okay.
I'll second it.
Second from Mr. Hodge. Discussion.
Will we see the criteria in our board meeting on Wednesday evening of this week?
If I've got the information to update the brochure, yeah.
I would like to offer an amendment to the motion that requires the board approve the criteria as adjusted in our Wednesday board meeting, so that
Okay, we don't need to amend the motion. Let's just, excuse me, Mr. Holliday, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I really did not. But that just needs to be a separate motion, which it doesn't really apply back to this first one, does it?
That's what we're gonna adjust. If we're gonna adjust it, we need to adjust it right now.
Well,
I understand all the other numbers and everything along that line, but the criteria is what the middle two columns is what I'm looking at. Is that what you're looking at, or are you just talking about the dates, adjusting all the numbers?
I am looking at the selection criteria and revisions there, as well as the district profile and the dates that we've talked about.
Okay, and I'm not arguing with any of that. I'm just saying
You just don't want it in this motion.
Well, what I want doesn't really matter. I'm saying it doesn't apply to what Mr. Blair's motion was and what Mr. Hodge seconded. Now, I think you can come back here with another motion, which I expect to vote for, but I don't think the amendment has to speak back to the subject at hand, which was dates and.
That's fine.
Okay, all right. If any other comments on Mr. Blair's motion and Mr. Hodge's second?
Does the current motion fill in a date for announce appointment? I don't see that it does, or superintendent assumes position. We've had discussion about that, and we're talking about the dates suggested. Does the current motion give us a date for superintendent assumes position?
No, it does not. If you're asking me, no.
That may depend on the action, that may depend on the candidate.
Well, yes, yes.
It is customary to put a start date in the brochure, so.
Say a proposed start date of June 1 or May 15th.
You all tell me.
I think 6-1 is sufficient.
I'm sorry?
I would think 6-1 is sufficient.
Okay.
Let's maybe, maybe have a little flexibility, maybe put May 15th in, and then call it a potential start date rather than a definitive start date.
Yeah, and I was going to point out a minute ago, May 15th would allow the schools still be in session, and perhaps more interaction could take place with the candidate and the student body and graduation dates and whatnot, but it may not be possible. I mean, maybe.
Mr. Hodge, would you be fine with May 15th as part of our motion?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Is that an amendment or an addendum to that? Is that all right?
Well, I'm asking about it. I personally like June 1st better than May 15th because of Mr. Odom completing all of the graduations and all of the occurrences of the end of school without anything else in place. And then June 1st, as we start planning toward next year, then I think that's a cleaner break. I do like June 1st better than July 1st, which is what's printed on the piece of paper.
That's correct.
Well, May 15th is not hard and fast. It's just
proposed.
It's proposed. So
a proposed date of May 15th?
Yeah, let's just stay with the proposed date of May 15th. If it moves back to June 1st or June 15th, that'll be.
But not July 1st, because that's what's actually printed on the piece of paper, and until I brought this up, that's what it was going to be.
Well, no. Actually,
no, we're going to change that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got to. It's 2012 for no other reason.
Well, no, I'm talking about on this piece of paper that.
Well, these are some just suggested timelines.
Yeah, I will.
But these are the dates that we're putting in place: February 23rd, March 5th. And July 1st is on here, and so. Is it going to be May 15th on that piece of paper?
Make the changes you do tonight and to this document and send it back to you.
Oh, Mr. Reed?
I would just say, with respect to the proposed date, if it's going to be before July 1st, just make sure we identify that as a transition period. They won't assume the duties and role of director of schools until July 1st, but Mr. Bennett needs to clarify that in his advertisement. They'll be working in a transition capacity for an interim period before July 1st.
Well, that's a reason to leave the date July 1st, 2018, and then we contract however we contract when we negotiate a contract.
Well, that choice is yours. If you want to make an amendment, you can do so. No.
No, I think the current motion specifies July 1st, 2018. You don't have July 1st, 2018? What date do you have?
I have that you made a motion or amendment to approve the criteria on the brochure at Macy's meeting, and you didn't get a second.
That was out of order, and so the chair called that amendment out of order, so that's not there.
I think the current motion on the floor that Mr. Blair made, that Mr. Hodge seconded, was for Plan 1 with a deadline date for submission of applications of February 23rd and with a recommendation coming back from TSBA on March 5th. And that's all we had in the motion.
Okay.
Interviews on
312. 312, that's as far as we've got.
My suggestion is that we vote on that. And then if we have other comments, other dates, other whatever, then we can address those in 30 seconds after we vote, or even quicker. But if there's any further comments about Mr. Blair's motion, his motion, then let's hear them. You're ready to vote, I would assume. All in favor of Mr. Blair's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, do we have further motions?
I move that the board review the revised brochure that will be used for recruiting candidates for director of schools and vote on it in our Wednesday board meeting this week.
Is there a second to that motion?
When we say board revise, I guess I need a little more clarification on that, because I know we'd talked about earlier that Mr. Evans would take this and would do a revision draft for us. So would that not be sufficient to have the board just review and either weigh in that we're good to go with Mr. Evans' recommendation, or if we have any proposed changes or thoughts on it, to be discussed that night?
And I think everything you just said is exactly right. The only thing that you didn't say was that Mr. Holliday wants it on Wednesday's agenda.
And a vote taken on it.
And yes.
Because without a vote.
You're talking about Wednesday.
Right. You know, if I want to include business and employers, local employers and the Chamber of Commerce in selection criteria number 6, where it says demonstrates the ability to build healthy relationships with students, employees, the board, county governments, and the community. And I've raised the issue that one thing that we have now is a robust relationship with our Chamber of Commerce and local employers, and that may be a place to insert that. And if I make that recommendation, when does the board get to review that? I don't contest that 45,000 students versus 37,600 students with a 2017 graduation rate of 95 point, et cetera. You know, we put in exemplary school district instead of all 5s, those things, but who blesses that language? I think this board blesses that language, and I think they do it Wednesday night. That's my motion.
Do we actually need a motion? Can you just not add that as chairman to the agenda, and then we can discuss it? And then if Mr. Holliday wants to make changes to the selection criteria at that time, can we not do that Wednesday night?
Yes, sir, we can do that, and or not. But I think right now we're going to have a second to Mr. Holliday's motion, and then I can make further comment, I think.
If I could, Mr. Jordan.
Yes, sir.
Let me just throw something else out here. I understand what Mr. Holliday is saying. As far as these changes goes, the numbers and all that, I guess Mr. Bennett's probably got all this on a disk or something like that where Mr. Evans, I'm sure you could probably plug these numbers in tomorrow sometime.
Yes, sir. The district profile information is what I understood that Mr. Bennett would need me to help him update, just the facts and figures. the updates that have changed over the past 6 years since we did this the last time. As far as criteria for candidates, of course, I wouldn't have anything to do with that.
Just thinking out loud, it's just me personally, I'd like to, see if you can make these changes tomorrow, clean this thing up.
Absolutely. I can have it by the end of the day tomorrow very easily.
Give us a copy possibly, and come back, any board members that want to add, say what Mr. Holliday's talking about, add it at that time, then bring it back Wednesday to be done.
Mr. Holliday, if the chairman will add this to the agenda for changes and discussion Wednesday night, do you need a formal vote at this time?
We'll have to review it on work session night.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just thinking Mr. Evans could probably make all the numerical changes.
But Mr. Holliday is talking about the selection criteria.
Correct. If he wants to, if we'll get that cleaned up and bring it tomorrow, he'll have a copy of it tomorrow night. Then if we want to discuss any changes, any board member wants to make any changes, and we agree to it as a board, let Mr. Evans take that and clean that up tomorrow night and bring it back Wednesday, and if we have to vote on it or approve it or whatever.
I suppose I believe that that's what my motion is, that we would vote on it on Wednesday night. And, you know, I hear fellow board members saying, if we make all of these changes, we put it on the agenda just for information only, or that we would approve it. If it's that we're going to approve it on Wednesday, that is indeed what my motion is.
Well, then it doesn't need to be made, because that is my intention, to put that on the agenda. We'll discuss it tomorrow night and vote on it Wednesday.
Okay.
Like we do everything else, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. What else, Mr. Bennett? How can we further confuse this? I stand ready to confuse you thoroughly if you would like for me to.
And I appreciate your willingness to do that. I think I've got everything I need. Obviously, I'll need the language for the criteria. Mr. Evans can give me that information. I can get with our communications department. We can plug that in and have you an updated brochure. As soon as possible. The sooner I get it, I can get it done and get that information to you so you can look at it, and then by Wednesday night, whatever changes you make, get those back to me. And once you're happy with that and you've formally approved that on Wednesday night, then I will get it posted Thursday or Friday at the latest. And we'll be in business and doing that.
Is there any stone that we have not looked under tonight that you think we need to?
I don't think so.
I was just wondering on one thing. People, boards all across the state, many things in common, and some things, of course, obviously considerably different. But I was wondering, is there a major mistakes in this process that boards make, or a mistake that a lot of boards make? Just asking, because I don't want to make them if we can avoid it.
I'm not thinking of anything that just seems to be consistent. I mean, boards make their own mistakes depending on the makeup of the board and the way they approach things, but you're very carefully approaching this, you're deliberately approaching this, and I think getting the information together and approving it step by step and deciding on your timeline is the best way to go. The interviews are the place, I think, where things, if you go off program with the interviews, and I think mistakes can be made there. And I'm concerned about that, and we'll talk about that further. But I think if you follow your process and do your interviews and treat everyone the same, you will come up with a good decision. Occasionally I see boards just kind of take off on their own to do things, and it sometimes ends well and sometimes doesn't.
I was going to kind of make that point maybe as nicely as I could before we adjourn. If there's something that you want to know, and you decided in your desperation you're going to call me, I'll either find out the answer if I don't know it. Okay.
Okay.
But I am not going to be calling you. Is the reason I'm making this statement, and telling you I want to be sure that Billy Bob is involved in this. And I'd assume you do not want those calls, because you're not going to get one from me.
Well, sometimes I get those calls, sometimes I don't, and you know, I pass information along to the screening committee, but the bottom line is we look at the criteria as you have amended it, and we compare those against the candidates we have and try to find you people who best fit those criteria.
Board, do you have other comments on tonight's special call subject? If not, remember, tomorrow is 4 o'clock because we have Health and Ed, 5:30? 5:30 where Mr. Odom will present the 5-year plan. And I assume Mr. Sandvik and Mr. Clardy probably both be there. I don't know, but I intend to go, and probably many of you do as well. So 4 o'clock tomorrow, 5 o'clock on Wednesday. Is there anything else that we need to discuss tonight? I really appreciate the discussion, as I always do, but particularly tonight. Mr. Bennett, thank you very, very much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It was a pleasure, and I'm sure you all will do a great job, and we look forward to the partnership.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.